Have you ever wondered why you feel nostalgia for places you've never been? Or why certain melodies, even when heard for the first time, seem to awaken memories of a life that wasn't yours? What if I told you that these feelings are not flaws in your mind, but echoes of a much older memory, an inheritance that is not in your blood, but in your soul, a collective memory shared by every human being who has ever walked the earth? What would you do with this truth? We have been taught to believe that our mind is an isolated fortress, a castle with walls built by our personal experiences. But that is a convenient lie, an illusion that keeps us small, separate, and controllable. The truth is that beneath the fragile soil of our individual consciousness flows an immense and timeless psychic ocean, an ocean that connects us all, where the gods and demons of all cultures, the heroes and villains of all myths, swim. A place you visit every night in your dreams, even if you don't remember it in the morning. Forget what you have learned about yourself. You are not a blank slate. You were born with a script, a symbolic map engraved in the depths of your being. The creation stories, the flood myths, the hero's journey. They are not just stories. They are chapters of your own inner biography, waiting to be read. And to ignore them is like navigating a stormy sea without a compass, repeating the same shipwrecks of past generations without ever understanding why. At this very moment, as you listen to me, this other reality pulses beneath the surface of your thoughts. It manifests in your inexplicable fears, in your overwhelming passions, in the patterns that repeat in your life like a relentless destiny. And the only question that matters is, will you continue to be a slave to these invisible patterns? Or will you have the courage to dive deep and find their origin? The answer you seek is not in the future. It has always been in the deepest past you can imagine. If you feel the weight of this truth, if a part of you has always known that there was something more beneath the surface of reality, then you are in the right place. But know that this path does not offer comfort, only clarity. And that clarity may cost you everything you believe yourself to be. If you are tired of living on the surface, of being a puppet of forces you do not understand, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we do not offer easy answers. We offer the map to the labyrinth that exists within you. And the journey begins now. Imagine your conscious mind as a small, well-lit, and familiar island. You know every tree, every rock, every grain of sand. This is your I, your identity, your personal memories, everything you believe you are. Modern psychology, for the most part, has dedicated itself to mapping this island, believing it to be the totality of your existence. But what if I told you that this island is just a tiny piece of land on a vast and unexplored planet, a planet covered by a primordial, dark, deep, and life-pulsating ocean? That ocean is the collective unconscious. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is the description of a psychic reality as real as the ground beneath your feet. Unlike the personal unconscious, which contains your repressed memories and forgotten experiences, the collective unconscious does not belong to you. It belongs to humanity. It is a repository of all ancestral experience, a shared psychic inheritance that each of us receives at birth. It is the fundamental foundation upon which your small island of consciousness was built. In it reside the primordial images, the matrices of thought and feeling that gave rise to all the myths, religions, and philosophies of history. The universal fear of the dark, the reverence for the mother figure, the image of the hero who slays the dragon. Where do these ideas that emerge spontaneously in cultures that never communicated come from? They are not learned, they are inherited. They are living fossils in the geology of our soul. Understanding this is the first and most dizzying step out of the prison of the ego. It is realizing that you are not an isolated entity, but the individual manifestation of a consciousness that spans millennia. The whispers you hear in the silence, the images that arise in your strangest dreams, the inexplicable attraction to certain symbols. These are the tides of this inner ocean touching the shores of your consciousness, inviting you to explore the vastness that you truly are. To ignore this call is to condemn yourself to live only on the surface, afraid of the depths, without ever knowing that the map to all the treasures and all the monsters you seek or fear has been within you from the very beginning. If the collective unconscious is the ocean, the archetypes are the powerful undersea currents, the invisible forces that shape the tides and determine the weather patterns on your island of consciousness. They are not specific images, but rather empty forms, universal predispositions to perceive, feel, and act in specific and recurring ways. Think of them as the instincts of the psyche. Just as a bird is born with the instinct to build a nest in a particular way, a human being is born with archetypes imprinted on their soul, ready to be activated by life experiences. The mother archetype, for example, is not your personal mother. It is the primordial form of motherhood, which contains the entire range of possibilities: the nurturing and loving mother, the devouring and suffocating mother, Mother Earth, Mother Nature. Your experience with your personal mother only fills this archetypal form with content, but the structure was already there. The same goes for the father, the hero, the shadow, the sage, the eternal child pure eternus, the trickster. Each of them is an autonomous energy center within you. When a life situation activates an archetype, you are possessed by it. The energy and perspective of that pattern take you over. Have you ever felt seized by a righteous and unshakable fury? That is the warrior archetype. Have you ever acted impulsively, chaotically, and subversively, breaking rules without thinking of the consequences? That is the trickster. Have you ever fallen so hopelessly in love that you felt the other person was your soulmate, the completion of your being? That is the anima or animus complex, the archetype of the soul, in action. The danger lies in our ignorance. When we are not aware of these internal characters, they dominate us. We live their stories instead of writing our own. The journey of individuation, the path to becoming a complete human being, necessarily involves the recognition of these inner gods. It is not about defeating them, but about establishing a conscious dialogue with them, integrating their energies without being dominated by them. It is about transforming a chaotic pantheon into a council of sages, where your consciousness is the mediator. Of all the stories humanity tells itself, none is more central, more vital, than the myth of the hero's journey. Gilgamesh, Hercules, Buddha, Christ, Luke Skywalker, you. The structure is the same because it does not describe an external event, but the fundamental process of the development of consciousness. The hero is the ego, the part of us that seeks to differentiate itself, that yearns for autonomy and meaning. The journey begins in the ordinary world, a state of unconscious comfort, often symbolized by the protection and suffocation of the maternal archetype. Then comes the call to adventure, a crisis, a dream. A longing that destabilizes this order and demands change. The dragon that the hero must face is the manifestation of the primary obstacle to his individuation. Frequently, the dragon is a symbol of the overwhelming power of the unconscious, of the terrible mother who does not want her child to grow up and leave her. It can also be the personification of the hero's personal shadow, everything he has repressed and fears in himself. Or it could be a representation of a tyrannical social structure, a terrible father who imposes rigid and lifeless rules. The battle against the dragon is the necessary confrontation with these forces. To win does not mean to destroy, but to assimilate the adversary's power. By slaying the dragon, the hero integrates its energy, rescuing the treasure or the princess. The treasure is the wisdom gained, a new and broader consciousness, access to a source of vitality that was previously imprisoned. The princess is a symbol of the anima, the soul, which has been freed from the dominion of the unconscious. The hero's return to the ordinary world with this treasure completes the cycle. He does not return the same. He returns as a master of both worlds, the conscious and the unconscious, capable of renewing his stagnant culture. This is not a story to be read. It is a story to be lived. Every phase of your life, every crisis you face, every fear you overcome, is an echo of this archetypal journey. The question is not whether you are on the hero's journey, but at which stage you find yourself now. And if you are refusing to answer the call, know that the dragon will not disappear. It will only grow in power, devastating your inner kingdom until you have no choice but to face it. For every light we project, a shadow is inevitably cast. In the architecture of the psyche, this principle is absolute. The persona is the social mask we wear, the idealized version of ourselves that we present to the world to be accepted and loved. It is our polished, polite, and functional self. The shadow, in turn, is everything we hide behind that mask. It is our psychic vault, where we lock away all the personality traits, impulses, desires, and emotions that we consider unacceptable, inferior, or evil, both to ourselves and to society. It is our repressed aggression, our secret envy, our greed, our dirty sexuality, our wild creativity that doesn't fit the mold. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply the other in us. The problem is that by repressing these parts, we do not eliminate them. We make them unconscious, where they take on a life of their own and gain power over us. An unintegrated shadow does not stay quiet in the basement of the mind. It seeks expression. The most common form is projection. We project our shadow onto others. That which irritates us most, that which we judge and condemn most in another person or group, is almost always an aspect of our own shadow that we refuse to acknowledge. The corrupt politician we hate, the lazy neighbor we despise, the arrogant colleague who infuriates us, they become blank screens on which we paint the portraits of our own unrecognized demons. The work with the shadow is the most difficult and crucial learning on the inner journey. It requires brutal honesty and the courage to look at what is most uncomfortable in ourselves. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming evil. It means withdrawing the projections, recognizing these traits as part of our totality, and thus disarming their destructive power. It is in this psychic trash that the gold is found. Within the shadow resides an immense amount of vital energy, spontaneity, and creativity. Embracing the shadow is the only path to wholeness, to becoming a three-dimensional, real, and complete human being, instead of a two-dimensional caricature of perfection. Within every man lives an inner woman, an unconscious feminine counterpart I call the anima. Within every woman lives an inner man, an unconscious masculine counterpart called the animus. These figures are not about sexual orientation or gender identity, but about fundamental psychological principles that have been culturally associated with the masculine and feminine. The anima personifies the principle of eros, the capacity to relate, intuition, the connection to the unconscious, mood, creativity, and emotion. The animus personifies the principle of logos, logic, structured thought, reason, opinion, assertiveness, and focus. In a society that has historically overvalued logos in men and eros in women, these internal counterparts have been relegated to the shadow, to the unconscious. A man, by repressing his eros, projects his anima. He falls madly in love with a woman who seems to embody all the soul qualities he lacks. He doesn't see her as she is, but as the carrier of his own lost soul. This leads to idealization and, inevitably, to disillusionment, as no real human being can bear the weight of an archetypal projection. A woman, by repressing her logos, projects her animus. She finds herself attracted to men who seem to have all the strength, authority, and conviction that she does not cultivate in herself. Often, her animus manifests internally as a critical and judgmental voice, a committee of men that sabotages her with rigid and demoralizing opinions. The journey of individuation requires the withdrawal of these projections and the beginning of a conscious relationship with this inner figure. For the man, it is the work of integrating his anima, of learning to feel, to relate to his own soul, to value intuition. For the woman, it is the work of integrating her animus, of developing her critical thinking, her assertiveness, of transforming the critical voice into a source of discernment and courage. When the anima and animus are integrated, they cease to be possessive demons and become mediators between the conscious and the unconscious. They become the bridge to the self, the archetype of totality. The sacred marriage, the hieros gamos of the alchemists, is not with an external partner, but with this divine counterpart within us. Just as the anima and animus represent inner polarity, there are archetypes that govern the great domains of existence, spirit and matter, meaning and life. The archetype of the wise old man or senex is the personification of spirit, meaning, order, and consciousness. He appears in myths and dreams as a magician, a prophet, a guide, or a king, offering wisdom and insight in times of crisis. He represents our ability to reflect, to find a pattern in chaos, to understand universal laws. However, every archetype has a polarity. The shadow of the wise old man is the terrible father or the negative wise old man. He is dogmatic rigidity, petrifying authority, tradition that kills life, Cold and soulless logic that scorns emotion and the body. It is the tyranny of absolute order that leads to stagnation and spiritual death. In opposition, we have the archetype of the Great Mother. She is the personification of nature, of matter, of life in its eternal cycle of birth, growth, death, and renewal. She is instinct, the body, the earth, the source of all nourishment and comfort. She is the primordial womb from which everything comes and to which everything returns. Her dark polarity, however, is the terrible mother. She is the force that devours, that suffocates, that refuses to let her children grow. She is the swamp of inertia, the comfort that becomes a prison, the dependence that prevents individuation. She is the chaos that dissolves all order, the instinctual life that does not allow for the development of consciousness. A healthy psyche lives in a state of dynamic tension between these two poles. A life that leans too much toward the side of the spirit becomes arid, disconnected from the body and the joy of living. A life that leans too much toward the side of matter becomes unconscious, directionless, trapped in cycles of instinct and immediate gratification. The journey of the soul is to learn to honor both gods, to build a temple for the spirit, without forgetting to cultivate the garden of matter. It is to find meaning in life and, at the same time, to live life with all its meaning. The modern world was built on the pillar of causality. Every effect has a cause. Science has taught us to see the universe as a great clockwork mechanism, predictable and logical. But there is another organizing principle in the universe, one that our rationalist culture has chosen to ignore, but that ancient cultures knew intimately. I call it synchronicity, or the principle of a causal connection. Synchronicity is not just a coincidence. A coincidence is a random event without meaning. A synchronicity is the simultaneous occurrence of two events, one psychic, a dream, a vision, a thought, and one physical, an event in the outer world, that have no causal link, but whose connection is laden with deep meaning for the person experiencing it. It is the moment when, distressed about a decision, you think of a specific animal, and at that exact instant, that animal crosses your path. It is when you dream of a friend you haven't seen in years and, the next morning, you receive a call from them. These are not accidents. They are creative acts in time. Moments when the veil between the inner world and the outer world becomes thin, revealing a hidden order, a pattern of meaning that connects all things. Synchronicity operates outside the logic of time and space. It suggests that the psyche and matter are not two separate things, but different aspects of a single, unified reality. These events tend to occur at times of great emotional charge or profound transformation. When an archetype has been activated in the unconscious, they function as confirmations, as signs that we are on the right path in our journey of individuation. They are like winks from the universe, assuring us that our inner quests are in harmony with the flow of outer reality. Learning to recognize synchronicity is to develop a new way of seeing the world. It is to move from a purely mechanical worldview to a symbolic worldview where events are not just things that happen, but messages to be deciphered. It is to understand that we are in a constant dialogue with the universe and that when we learn to listen, it answers us in mysterious and perfect ways. Every night, without exception, you close your eyes to the outer world and immerse yourself in a theater of absolute realism, where logic is fluid, time is elastic, and symbols speak louder than words. Dreams are not, as many believe, random psychic garbage, the chaotic residue of brain activity. They are the natural language of the unconscious. They are letters sent from the deepest and wisest part of your psyche to your superficial and often mistaken consciousness. The primary function of dreams is compensatory. They bring to light everything that consciousness is ignoring, repressing, or overvaluing. If your conscious attitude is excessively rational and controlling, your dreams will be populated by chaos, wild emotions, and instinctual figures. If you are living in a way that betrays your true nature, your dreams will become nightmares, not to punish you, but as a fire alarm, a desperate call for change. To understand a dream, one must abandon daytime logic. The language of dreams is the language of symbols. A car in a dream is rarely just a car. It can symbolize the way you are driving your life. The house is often a symbol of your own psyche. The basement represents the unconscious, the attic the spirit, and the different rooms, different aspects of your personality. The characters that appear are, most often, personifications of parts of yourself, especially your shadow or your anima animus. The interpretation of a dream is not a process of literal translation using a dream dictionary. It is a dialogue, an amplification. One takes a symbol from the dream and explores its personal connections and, crucially, its archetypal connections through myths, fairy tales, and religions. What has that symbol meant to humanity throughout the ages? By doing so, you allow the dream's message to reveal itself in its depth. Paying attention to your dreams is like having a personal and infallible spiritual guide. It is the most intimate and direct of oracles, offering, night after night, a precise diagnosis of the state of your soul and the map for the next step on your journey of individuation. The ultimate purpose of human life, the goal of this entire complex inner journey, is not happiness, wealth, or success as the world defines them. It is individuation. This is the process, often long and arduous, of becoming an individual. In the truest sense of the word, undivided, whole. It is the journey to realize the fullness of your unique personality, to become the person you were destined to be from birth. Individuation is not an act of selfishness. On the contrary, it begins with the dismantling of the inflated ego. The first step is differentiation from the persona, the social mask. It is realizing that you are not your job, your social status, or the roles you play. It is a painful but liberating stripping away of false identities. The second, and most challenging, step is the confrontation with the shadow. As we have seen, this involves withdrawing, projections, and courageously accepting the aspects of ourselves we consider inferior. Without this integration, wholeness is impossible. The third step is the encounter with the archetype of the soul, the anima or animus. This involves developing a conscious relationship with this inner counterpart, integrating the qualities of eros or logos that have been neglected, transforming this figure from a possessive demon into a mediator with the deep unconscious. The final goal of this process is the encounter with the self. The self is the archetype of totality and the regulating center of the psyche. Just as the sun is the center of the solar system, the ego is not the center. The ego orbits the self. The self is the union of the conscious and unconscious, the totality of the personality. It is often symbolized in dreams and visions by unifying figures like the circle, the square, the cross, or the mandala. Achieving individuation does not mean becoming perfect. Perfection is a neurotic ideal. The goal is completeness, and completeness necessarily includes imperfection, light, and shadow. It is being able to embrace the contradictions of your nature with awareness and acceptance. It is the journey of a lifetime, and perhaps more. It is the noblest and most significant work a human being can undertake, to give birth to oneself. The legend of Atlantis, the great civilization that sank into the ocean, losing all its advanced knowledge, is more than a story. It is an archetypal symbol, a powerful metaphor for an event that occurred within the psyche of Western humanity. Atlantis is our lost connection to the world of the unconscious, to the wisdom of instincts, symbols, and myths. The great catastrophe that sank it was the rise of rationalism and the Enlightenment. In our quest for light, logic, and scientific control, we declared war on mystery, the irrational, the soul. We built the brilliant world of ego consciousness, but in the process, we lost access to an entire continent of wisdom. This Atlantean knowledge did not disappear. It was submerged, relegated to the depths of the collective unconscious. It continues to live within us, but in a fragmented and inaccessible way to our conscious mind. It manifests in the ruins we find in our dreams, in the artifacts that myths and fairy tales have preserved, in esoteric traditions like alchemy and astrology, which were the forerunners of depth psychology. The work of modern man, the true heroic call of our era, is to be a psychic archaeologist. It is to dive into the dark waters of your own unconscious to rediscover this lost legacy. Every analyzed dream, every understood complex, every meditated symbol is like rescuing a golden artifact from this submerged civilization. Alchemy, which the ancients believed was about turning lead into gold, was, in fact, a symbolic manual for individuation. The lead prima materia is our undifferentiated and unconscious psyche, full of conflicts. The shadow, the gold, is the self, the individuated and whole personality. The alchemical process of solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, is the psychological process of deconstructing the false identities of the ego, to then reintegrate the elements of the psyche into a higher unity. The legacy of Atlantis is not a utopia to be rebuilt in the outer world. It is an inner kingdom to be rediscovered. By making this journey, you are not just healing yourself, you are helping to heal the dissociation of our culture, building a bridge between reason and the soul, and bringing to the surface the knowledge that our era most desperately needs.